This video is intending to walk you through the decisions you need to make in terms of choosing a statistical test when encountering a scenario for AQA Psychology A Level. In terms of the specification content that this video will cover, it will refer to the sign test and then factors affecting the choice of test. You only need to be able to calculate the sign test. All of the others that are mentioned in the sort of second bullet point, you only need to know when they are appropriate to use and justify your choice, and then also be able to interpret a calculated value and use a critical values table to be able to determine whether the results are significant or not. Okay, this is the choice of statistical test grid. Most teachers use a variation of this grid, but this really boils it down to the key essential information. You might have also heard of the Simon Cowell mnemonic in terms of being able to remember the test names. So Simon Cowell wants more singers receiving unanimous praise, which then leads you to the names of the 8 different tests. When making a decision about what test is appropriate for a given scenario, the first decision you need to make is whether the scenario and the research that you were looking at is looking for a difference, a relationship, or an association. Okay, in terms of deciding whether a scenario is a test of difference or relationship, a test of difference means the scenario you're looking at is an experiment. So you've got an independent variable and a dependent variable. One thing changes or is changed. One thing is being measured. So in terms of the independent variable, you might have 2 separate conditions. So this might be looking at age differences, or it might be something that the experimenter manipulates. So completing a task in silence versus a noisy room. And then one thing is obviously being measured for the dependent variable. A test of relationship means the scenario that you're looking at is a correlation. So that means you've got covariables. Nothing is being manipulated or changed. 2 things are being measured. So for example, height and weight. Association is a little bit different. It's really a basic form of relationship. In terms of the AQA spec, you don't really need to know much more than that. Chi-squared is technically a test of difference via association. But what that means for you as a student means that if you see the word association in a scenario, sort of 95% of the time, it means that chi-squared is the most appropriate test. Okay, so you can see here that the first column, or rather second column I should say, has been filled in. So your 2 correlational statistical tests, Spearman's and Pearson's, are the only 2 ones that are tests of relationship. The rest are all tests of difference. The second decision that you need to make is whether the scenario you're looking at has collected related or unrelated data. Unrelated data means that you are firstly looking at an experiment, and secondly that an independent measures design was used. So that means you've got 2 groups of participants. One group does one condition and the other group does the other condition. Related data refers to basically anything else used. So if you're looking at an experiment, they've used a repeated measures design or a matched pairs design. Remember, in matched pairs, they have been matched, so you can treat them in terms of data analysis as though they are the same participant. Do watch out for that in scenarios in terms of have they been matched or not. Because they do sometimes like to throw that sort of somewhere in the middle that students tend to skim, or somewhere right at the end. Or also it means that the research method used was a correlation. So in a correlation, you're collecting, say, 2 sets pieces of data from each participant. So in the height and weight example, from each participant you collect both height and weight. So if it's a correlation, it's always considered related, or you might see it referred to as paired data. Here you can see the third column filled in terms of which test is related and which tests are for unrelated data. The third decision you need to make is level of measurement. There are 3 levels of measurement in psychology that you need to know about. The first is nominal. This is the most basic sort of form of measurement. This is when you collect frequency data in categories. It's worth noting that just sort of categories alone is not always quite enough justification for nominal data, because you do need the frequency and category part. The most common example that I've seen of this type of level of measurement in the AQA papers so far is something along the lines of you've got a control group and a treatment group, and then you look to see if symptoms got better, worse, or stayed the same. Something along those lines. The second level of measurement is ordinal. This is when you got ranked data. It's normally subjective in some way. So for example, a scale of 1 to 10, e.g. rating attractiveness. So with that, there's no sort of objective way of defining what is a 10, what is a 5, because there's some opinion and subjective judgment involved in that scale. With this level of measurement, the intervals between the points are not equal. So for example, the difference between a 5 and a 6 out of 10 is not necessarily the same as the interval between a 9 and a 10 out of 10. This can also be things like number of words recalled on a list, because you can't necessarily say that all lists are of equal difficulty, or score on a memory task, score on a visual task. There's some sort of subjective judgment with those measures as well. The final level of measurement is interval. This is when your data has fixed units with equal intervals between the points on the scale. So this is generally our standard units of measurement. Temperature in Celsius, time in seconds, time in minutes, hours, years. Those sorts of things are considered interval, because you can say that 60 seconds is exactly double 30 seconds. Another one that I've seen a couple of times that is considered interval is heart rate as well. In terms of deciding which level of measurement that you've got, you need to look, if it's an experiment, at the dependent variable only. A lot of students fall into the trap of saying, oh, you've got 2 different conditions, therefore you've got categories, therefore it must be nominal. That's not the case. You need to identify what is the dependent variable, what is it that they're measuring, and look at that and make your decision. In terms of correlation, you need to look at both things that they're measuring. So in our height and weight example, you need to look at how is height being measured and how is weight being measured. For the Pearson's R test to be appropriate, both of those covariables, so the 2 things you're measuring, need to be an interval level of measurement. In this scenario, if a scenario has one variable for a correlation that is ordinal and one that is interval, then you would have to go with Spearman's instead. And then obviously if both are ordinal, then Spearman's would also be appropriate. So this is the completed table, which covers all of the 3 decisions that you have to make. In terms of answering the exam questions, it's normally along the lines of a psychologist decided to use this particular test in relation to a scenario they've given you. Explain the reasons why she chose this test. Or it might ask you, what test would be appropriate? Why is that? And ask you to give a justification for that. In terms of getting the marks, just saying, for example, Wilcoxon is appropriate because it's a test of difference, it's related, and it's ordinal. In order to really pick up the marks, you need to make sure that you contextualize your answer to the given scenario. So say it's a test of difference because they're looking for the difference between silent and noisy, for example. It's related because they used a repeated measures design, so all participants did all conditions of the experiment. And then in terms of level of measurement, say they measured a score on a task that they had to do, and this was out of 20. It's a subjective scale, therefore it's ordinal. Okay, so I hope that helps you in terms of understanding and going through the decision-making process in terms of factors affecting choice of test. Thank you.